so quiet all of a sudden. Hi, welcome everybody. This is the CEO Roundtable for the ACSO conference. We titled this Resilience and Adaptation. And I really appreciate you all being here. I know it's the morning session. I'm also really excited though because we are live streaming this conversation on ACSO's YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and then it will be recorded, which we're excited to make available for our members. So, yeah, so thanks for being here. I'm Sarah Weber. I'm Executive Director of ACSO. And I just want to say a couple of words before we dive into the conversation this morning with our panelists. I first of all want to thank our sponsors. We have sponsors of all of our sessions at the conference, and this particular session is sponsored by 3 ACSO board members. Nora Brady, Elizabeth Sherman, Scott Vander. Thank you, sponsors. Thank you for making this possible. Thank you for all your service on the ACSO board. And if any of you are scavenging, which I'm calling the scavenger hunt, if any of you are doing the app scavenger hunt, the code for this session is breakouts with an S 20, in case anyone is trying to win that sweet Disney gift card. All right, I think those are all my announcements. So this panel is really interesting to me, and I really wanted to have a CEO panel this year at the conference because I have, in my role as ACSO Executive Director, spent the last 5 years attending Zoom peer forums with the CEO constituency group. And I've been able to sort of bear witness over 5 years to the process and the thoughts and the deliberations and the complexities of challenges of leading orchestras, and what a privilege it's been to have a front row seat to hear these leaders, but many others in the room, as I sort of navigate a really tricky period, I think, in just life in general, but certainly in leading an arts organization. And so I thought it would be fair and nice to sort of break them out of the Zoom and sort of let you all hear some of the things that I've been able to hear. And I think this composition of folks is particularly interesting because it is, they represent orchestras from different parts of the state, different, very unique communities, different budget sizes, but they're also at different places in their own careers. As I introduce them just in a minute, I'm going to just share where they are in their, tenure with their current orchestra, and it's very mixed. That's also really interesting. So I think I'll just get down to the business of introducing our panelists. This is Emma Moon. Emma is the CEO of Philharmonia, Baroque Orchestra and Chorale, which is located in San Francisco. Emma has been on the job less than a year, 8 months?
10 months to be exact.
10 months. She is a seasoned arts leader, but brand new to this role, really, not even hit the year mark yet. So I think that's really interesting. We're excited to hear your insights. Then we have John Forsyte, who is president and CEO of the Pacific Symphony, which is the opening plenary, if you were there. John, almost 27 years. Have you hit your 27-year anniversary yet? Remarkable. That's a remarkable career anywhere. And we're going to ask John a little bit about that. Then we have Kim Noltemy, who's the brand new CEO of the LA Phil. Just hit your year mark, just passed your year mark. Kim comes from Dallas and previously the Boston Symphony, but pretty new to the LA Phil. So we're going to ask her some of her impressions about her first year on the job. And then finally, Natalia, who is the CEO of the New West Symphony. And Natalia has also had a very long tenure, 17 years at orchestra. So it's a mixed composition in terms of how long they've been with their orchestras. So we're going to get into the conversation. We don't have very long. We are going to leave some time for some questions, and I want this to be semi-organic. So I'm just going to kind of go where the winds blow. I have notes, but we're going to see what happens. But I want to start with a question, because John, you have reminded me many times through prepping for this, that even though things are hard, there's a lot of joy and value, and we're extremely lucky to work in the industry that we work in. And so I want to ask all of you to just sort of warm up. Looking back at the past season, what is one moment, if you think you can encapsulate it, one moment that reminded you why you love leading an orchestra? I'm just going to go down the line, and this is gonna warm us up and start us on a positive note, I hope. Emma, do you have an answer for that question? I think you can. I think you can pull it out. There you go.
So I want to say the first month of the job, last November, Philharmonic Baroque Orchestra and Chorale actually embarked on their first tour of the pandemic, and it was to the Southern California region. So I, out of curiosity, wanted to check it out, and we went to venues in Santa Barbara. We went to Northridge at the Soraya, as well as we were part of the season for the Philharmonic Society of Orange County. So that was at Sophie University. So it was my first opportunity to see our band action. And at Sophie University, we've never been. It's the most incredible facility, designed at Disney Concert Hall. And we had programmed something very outside of the box, which was Vivaldi's Four Seasons, but performed by a mandolinist. So we had this artist named Avi Avital, who's sort of the Jimi Hendrix of the mandolin. And he played it with our orchestra, and to see the smiles on everyone's faces, because in the beginning people were sort of skeptical. It's for the violin, it's not for the mandolin. On people's faces on the stage, as well as the audience, that gave. So that's what I really enjoyed the first year.
Thank you. John, same question to you.
Yeah, that's good.
The culmination of Carl's tenure was the Verdi Requiem. It was a choice that we were struggling with for those who were outside of his decision process. We bet on it. Those are the final words of Verdi Requiem. Deliver me. And it's not deliver Carl St. Clair, it's deliver the institution to the next chapter. And when I that kind of emotion that was coursing through musicians and chorus and soloists and audience, it always reminds me it's really just a big community, and he enabled the community. So it was a great reminder of how powerful a legacy is, and spending time in one organization for many years builds community. So it's very special.
Thank you, John.
Similarly, I would say my greatest memory is the first concert I saw with Gustavo Dudamel conducting, just because of the same reasons, John, that one person can make such an enormous difference and touch so many people. He's going to New York, so that's a bummer for us. But on the flip side, he's going to touch lives on the other coast, and that's not a negative. That's a good thing. We all do better when it's lifted for all. So anyway, it just was very profound to me to see the real connection that Gustavo has with the audiences in Los Angeles, whether it's at the Bowl or at Disney Hall, and also just his real authenticity, and it's unique, and it's our job to find a new leader that can do the same kind of thing, and that moment just struck me.
So my moment is related to resiliency. After mountain fires that were in Ventura County in Camarillo, we did not know whether we could even open the hall, whether there would be smoke. The concert was scheduled, it was sold out. We came in, and my music director, Michael Christie, decided to do a pre-concert activity with the audience. And he said, whatever you're working through right now, whatever that you need to overcome, this is for you. And he started singing a song that his son sang at his choir, the recital. And it goes like this: I will be your stepping stone, I will stand by you. And everyone in the audience got up and started singing with him, and we had choir that was walking on stage, and they are singing. And he says, you guys can hold hands if you need to. You can lean in, you can lean on someone. And there was this woman in the front row who said, I'll hold hands with you. I lost my home in the fire. And he jumped from the stage, sat on the edge of the stage, held her hand, and held space for her. He was singing with her, and we were there probably for 5 minutes. Imagine in the beginning of the concert, we're taking 5 minutes as a community to sing together. And he did not stop until she sat down in her seat. And for me, that moment, I started recording it, it's on my Facebook feed. And that moment really reminded me that how resilient we all are, how resilient and how adaptive we all are, and how we can overcome anything as a community. And the healing power of music is just amazing. So that was my reminder why I'm doing the job.
Wow, thank you. I was gonna start asking questions about the tough stuff, but I don't feel ready to do that yet after all these stories. So I'm gonna circle back to that in a minute. So I want to ask a little bit about you all, and you started talking about it, but sort of your leadership and vision and how you approach that. And I have some questions specifically for each of you, but please feel free to all jump in and respond to each other as well. But I think I want to start with John and Natalia. I talked about in introductions how you've been with your orchestras for a very long time. And that level of commitment to one orchestra, I think, is unusual. And I wanted to ask you about that, both why, and then what keeps you, Natalia, you sort of started talking about it, what keeps you fresh and motivated and like ready to plan another season, ready to do another gala, because there's so much cyclical nature of the job, and you sort of do things over and over repetitively. How do you keep coming at it with fresh eyes and, you know, motivation every year?
Okay, so I've been on the job for 17 years, and sometimes I joke, is it like 17 progressive year, or am I living the same year over and over again? 17 times. Yeah, so, and I love my job because I see how the community is growing, how different challenges, and I love building bridges. I love partnerships. I see new organizations pop up. New the 850,000 people population. Our county is small, and we have over 5,000 non-for-profits in the county. And it's fun for me to see how it's growing. But I also remember, and I don't know, John, if you remember, about a dozen years ago, we had lunch and we were talking about how do you really stay motivated. And John taught me something that I really took to heart. He said, I don't mind hiring consultants for professional development. It keeps us fresh. It really gives us a new perspective. So you should never feel that someone is doing a job better than you do. You should always learn. And so that learning really stayed with me for all these years. I feel like I'm a student of New West Symphony, and I'm learning something new every day.
It's a little hard to, look back and try to think about where I was looking forward to at the same time, about how long of a tenure I was, but it's a pattern for me. I was in Kalamazoo, Michigan for a long time, relatively early in my life. I think it's kind of strange that we always look at tenure in the management space. It's sort of it's something I find. It's remarkable how many people say how, why, all the time. And I'm thinking, but the musicians stay so long. I mean, there's so many musicians in the Pacific Symphony that have tenures longer than me. So when people are celebrating my 25th anniversary, there's a bunch of them saying, I didn't get anything. And I think it's important to reflect on the oddity, because for me, it's been about just building chapters in my life here. So I'm very blessed. First of all, maybe Orange County is unique that we had such a trajectory of opportunity. So there was sort of the pre-hall, concert hall moment where we were very undeveloped. We didn't own our own percussion equipment in 1998. We had rehearsal hall in a church. Our offices were tiny, we had 17 people on staff. It's a nice size organization, but there were so many things that have to happen over many years of development. And just reinvention, just finding ways to reinvent. Because basically it's a blank canvas to paint on. So new people enter the organization all the time with a new set of colors. And if you don't see yourself through a sort of egocentric point of view that you have to have the answers, to the point of bringing new ideas, having curators join our organization to support Carl's vision or to enhance or enrich Carl's vision. So many things evolve. And it just never felt like one year was like another. Now, the fundraising machine, the annual fund, to me that is the Sisyphus of the job, And, I really wish we were in a place where I started a fiscal year with 30% of the philanthropy in place. And, this kind of resistance to multi-year giving that I felt in my organization, a lot of, as the market turns, attitude towards philanthropy, that's difficult. And it was not true in the Midwest. I think that is sort of peculiar here, at least my experience. So if I could change anything, it would really be feeling like I have some foundational and frankly, multi-year horizons that I have confidence in economically. But we are reinventing all the time, and what we play, how we play it, where we play it has changed dramatically. So it doesn't feel like the same orchestra.
It does not feel like Groundhog Day for you. That's good. Except for Andy. Well, Kim and Emma, I kind of want to flip it, the question on, to the other side of the coin for the two of you, both being a year into jobs, although having worked in the arts for a long time and been at places for a long time. But I want to know sort of how you adapted or have gotten the organization to adapt to you or adapted to it. Maybe it's a combination of the two. And then I also want to ask both of you what surprised you most in your first year at your organization. And we'll start with you.
So in terms of the transition, this is my first CEO role, by the way. And I thought it was going to be a challenge, but the skill sets that I have inherited and learned from my previous roles, heading development departments at different performing arts organizations, really helped inform me. And so nothing really surprising came about during this transition process, because I've also been on the other side. So I've actually been on the negotiating committee with the musicians as opposed to management. So I feel like that'll lend a lot to future negotiations, one that's going on right now. But in terms of the transition, it was a lot of listening on my part, because I don't know if some of you are aware of Philharmonic, Chorale, and Orchestras history, but it's been around for 44 years, and it was at its height during the 80s, 90s, and even 2000s. And in recent years, post-pandemic, it really struggled financially. So I had to do a lot of troubleshooting, a lot of resolution with different vendors, different partners, different people, including donors. And so really actively and doing something about it was very key for me during this transition process.
So listening.
So I wouldn't say anything really surprised me about the transition. Basically, if you're running an orchestra, it just changes the size and scope, and obviously the size and scope of the LFO is pretty substantial. And just managing the priorities is kind of the key. When I left Boston, where I'd been at the ACSO for 21 years, I knew every single person. I grew up in Boston, so literally I knew everyone everywhere. And so the big transition for me was when I went to Dallas and I had to learn everybody. I knew 3 people, and once I did that once, I knew I could totally do that. And when I moved to LA, that there's a process of how you go about meeting everyone and building a network in a new city, and it's really intimidating the first time you do it, but once you do it once and you can know that you can do it, you have a different level of confidence and your brain can fit all that stuff, because you might think you wouldn't have been able to before. So that was, I think the hardest part of any transition is getting to know all the people who you need to know, because you cannot be effective without relationships. It's all about trust and building trust through knowing people and having that you're being sincerely interested in what they're doing. Probably the biggest challenge for me was the geography, combined with all of the really difficult things that happened in the first year of my position. There's the government issues that we're all dealing with. There's the fires that everyone in Southern California and Northern California too is dealing with. And just, there were the riots, curfews. I mean, I definitely was like, wow, I have a little bit of bad luck this year, but I'm sure that's past and everything will be fine after this.
No more problems, guaranteed. Well, I was gonna ask that very question because I live in LA and it's wild here. And how do you lead through something like that? Because it certainly has had an effect. I know the fires affected musicians. I know that your concerts were affected by curfews and unrest in the city. How do you, as a new person who's building the trust, right, or building those relationships, how do you then lead an organization through a lot of external stuff that was not expected and try to hold the team together and still do what you're doing for the community? How did you do that?
Well, I think COVID was really good training for crisis management. I mean, what we all went through during COVID showed us that we can make things happen no matter what. We can manage really difficult situations. We can support our staffs, musicians, the community through music as a tool for healing and inspiration. And I think because I was new and I hadn't ever been through a fire situation, right? This is not something that happens in that many other parts of the country. I probably was able to be more sort of circumspect about the whole thing because I mean, I live right across from Disney Hall and on the 44th floor, and I could see the Palisades, literally red flames from my apartment, which is like, I couldn't even believe it. And my daughter was staying with me at the time, and she's 29, and we just sat and looked out there and like, this is unbelievable. How could this be happening? But immediately I switched into the gear of what do we do? What do we do for everyone in our community? How do we use the music to help as much as we can? How do we use our resources, our team, because we have a large team and a large network. How do we use our team to help, whether that's raising money or volunteering and all that? So, and then of course at the LA Phil, we have an incredibly experienced management team that could easily help me plug into what were the possibilities. And the board was amazing because one of the things that I did immediately is call them and say, we need a fund to help our team, our musicians, our staff, who they're not going to get insurance payments for a long time, if ever. And I said, if every one of you will just give $10,000, this will make all the world of difference. And they, within a week, it was something like $6 that was available to immediately write checks to help people. And I think that really inspired me to think about what we have as a group to make things happen, because all that was so fast and I was new and all of that. So I think that's crucial. What your resources are, meaning like how are people standing behind you and how do you take that power and turn it into something meaningful that goes beyond your immediate group. And so that was one thing. The curfews and the riots. I mean, again, weirdly from my tall perch, I could see everything happening, and, I was sort of like, there's obviously a few days of really significant, violence and unrest, but the rest was like the fake news department. I'm like, I'm here, I can see everything. This isn't, this news footage is the same thing over and over and over. And I remember, getting messages from around the country and also even our board, and I was kind of like, no, I'm looking out right there, it's fine. I took a walk, I walked through the whole city, everything's fine, nothing's happening. And, it's just really interesting. So in that sense, because I was in the middle of it, I couldn't overreact because I was there. So, that's kind of just luck that I happened to be in that place and be able to make that assessment, so.
Hopefully year 2 is a little less eventful for you. You mentioned boards a minute ago, how great your board was. I want to ask all of you about boards, and I told you I wanted to do this because I think that boards are also also sort of trying to figure out where they could be the most impactful and helpful, and you've worked a long time. So I want to just sort of throw this out to the group about how important are boards to you and to the success of your orchestras. And I know it seems like an obvious question, but I still want to ask it. Who wants to answer? Get into it, Emma. You're new.
Boards vary from organization. It's very clear to me. So the board that I had at SFJazz, a Performing Arts Center, was very, very passionate about the art form. And one of the mandates I was given by the chairwoman of the board at that time, who was the C-level executive at Apple, she said, Emma, one of the key things you need to do is really diversify the board. So this was George Floyd, the civil unrest and all that. And so, I recruited 75% of that board. And to this day, I'm so proud of what I've actually accomplished in terms of recruitment efforts. But that was for SFJazz. Now, for the current organization, we have a small but mighty board. They're very dedicated. I want to say the average age is probably, don't use this against me, 75 to 80. And so each board, I noticed, has a different role. So Philharmonic Baroque, it's providing historical context, but it's also being the general governments. They're the ones that supervise and authorize and do all these things for the executive leadership, for the music director search and all that. So everything has to run by them. Similarly, with SFJazz, the board had a similar, but again, it depends from organization to organization, but that's what I've encountered.
Anyone else want to? Well, John, I want to ask you, because when we were preparing for this, you said one of your proudest accomplishments for the Civic Symphony was having a string of, I think you said 10 incredible board chairs. And you talked about the importance, almost matchmaking between yourself and your board chair and needing to find that sort of right chemistry. Can you talk a little bit about what you look for? Is your board chair in the audience?
My board chair is.
Oh, great. Okay.
Arthur, you want to comment? To be very transparent, I think it may have been Ralph Black in the States speaking, but he was sort of a management consultant, freelancer for the Symphony League decades ago, and he wrote Blackouts. I don't know if you ever read them, but they were great witticisms about boards and leadership. He says, the most important committee for you to insist to be on, as if it was unusual at that time, was the nominating committee. I don't know if anybody still uses that term, governance committee or board affairs committee. So early in my tenure, I actually negotiated into my contract that I would sit on the committee, that I would be included to a great degree in the chairmanship process, that is the discussion. Our board nominates, ideas for who might succeed Arthur, and we go through the same rigorous discussions, I'm sure all of you. But at the end of the day, I feel like successive generations of board members have come to trust my culture judgment. And not just for me, but for the music director. Because I think this triad, I really leaned on my board chairs to help me with music director conversations that I didn't really want to have with Carl and even with Alexander already. And I think sometimes that's really healthy. And I've always been thinking about, like, board chairs have to be as well informed as I am about so many aspects of orchestra management for succession reasons, but also for that kind of trusting mentorship. No matter what age I am, I always look at the board chairs as a mentor. And I think that sort of humble role that you have with leaders can really benefit the relationship. And every one of them have become very dear friends. Every one of them has provided me with different insight. And I've been able to not just handpick, but really guide the culture decision of who is the right person at the right time. And it's not always the strongest philanthropist, and it's not always the best fundraiser. It can really be the person who has great operational insight, or it can be like a great diplomat. Arthur, I would say, is a brilliant diplomat. I'm just like really handles diverse groups of people well. Great communicator. He's a fantastic editor. He edits everything I ever write. Everything, you know, at the high level. So it's great to have a partner like that. And I've just been, I think the board chair is the culture setter for the entire board. Last thing I would say is, I put this in the board orientation. The single biggest determinant of the success of the Symphony Orchestra is the board of directors, not the management team, not the musicians, not the volunteer. It is the board. And if you're going to focus your energy on one thing, it's board development. It's the top of the list.
This is one of the reasons I wanted to ask about boards, because post-pandemic, as sort of folks have been getting their feet under them again, I think that the board has a huge role in sort of making or breaking how that's going. And so I wanted to hear from all of you about your thoughts about the board and your relationship. Kim and Natalia, I both have a question for you regarding boards before we move on. Natalia, you told me that when you were sort of orienting or training new board members, there's two things that you tell them that their job is, and I wanted you to share that with the group.
I preach again. So when I was a young executive, I realized that a lot of board members don't understand why they're on the board. Like, they are prominent members of the community, but they have no idea what they're doing. So when I orient my board, I always say, I'm just going to make it very, very simple, that your job, you have two job duties, is governance and providing resources. That's it. You don't get into operations. You cannot tell the music director what to play, et cetera, et cetera. So, and once you put them on the right path and break it down, what does it mean to provide resources? Is it opening doors that helps our staff to walk through the doors? Is it solicitation, whatever that is? And I think that once you make it very, very simple, then you have a successful board. I've been through 9 board chairs as well. And I think that one of the first 4 board chairs, or I don't remember exactly the sequence, were women. For the first time in the history of the symphony, we had a board chair who was a woman, and it was a culture shock on the board, really. And I think that I've gone through a lot of reiterations too, because I said, okay, I'm not going to be on the nominating committee. I'm just going to try and see if they could nominate without me. And so I've had disasters too. And so I went back and forth, and now I am advising my board. I'm wiser. But I also thought that every board chair and every board decides whether they are an advisory board to you because they're consultants to you and you have to do all the work. They decide whether they're an interim because we're between 2 disasters and we just have to, deal with it. You have a fundraising board. There is a reiteration of a fundraising board, and there is a reiteration of a governing board. And so now I sort of already see the tendencies of the board chairs and what kind of a board that is going to be. And yes, we do have a say in it, but I think that the board chairs really set the tone for what kind of board this reiteration of the board is going to be. Do you have terms of limits on your board?
We have a little bit of flexibility, but it's defined in bylaws as 2 + 1. But we've had 5-year board chairs. And honestly, I think it's very difficult to have a 2-year term. That's just really short. I really like the 3-4 year timeline.
Kim, you said something interesting to me about how you have seen boards evolve over the years as you've been in the industry, and I wondered if you would maybe just, I don't know, offer some reflections on it. If you remember what I mean.
I do, yes, yeah. So when I was at the Boston Symphony, I saw a board that was very removed from the day-to-day information or knowledge and just felt like their role was ceremonial, ambassadorial, and then they would support the organization. They didn't really know a lot of the details of what was going on, other than a couple of people who were Uber attendees and became friends with musicians and whatnot. Over time, I was there for quite a long time. I saw the evolution of that particular board, but it translated in my subsequent jobs where the board members were asked to give more and more support because the cost of running orchestras increased and the earned revenue generally was decreasing at Boston Symphony, but also as a percentage of the budget, and so as they were asked to give more money, or they were asked, we brought new board members on who were younger, they really wanted to know the details and be more activist board members, and that created a bit of a culture shock, I would say, for the team that was used to sort of the more passive role, and transitioning into that space where you have to make sure you're really effectively communicating with the board what's going on so they feel informed and they feel like they know sort of a little bit of the gossip and the cool insider information. And then you also manage their expectations that they're not a specialist in marketing because they buy things. And they're not a specialist in food services because they, and all of those things, it's really tricky, right? Because of course, we all have our opinions on these subjects. And so just kind of making sure that the boards have the confidence in the team and knowing that the team is using data and listening to the whole audience, not just a group, and on every level, including on the philanthropy committees, because again, someone can have a strong opinion about one particular subject and how money should be raised, or who should be on the board, who should be asked for money, all of those things. And, I think that is a delicate balance now that it wasn't so much 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And we do want board members who are really engaged, and engaged different than it used to. Engaged used to mean how many concerts did you come to? It used to mean, what events did you show up, and did you show up at the board meetings? And now engaged isn't so much about how many board meetings you can attend and how many concerts you can attend, although we wish that were true. It's about how you're customizing the engagement by the individual. And if you're not able to do that, it's harder to get the board to be as effective to support the organization. And, I think we spend a lot of time on that. Phil and I spent a lot of time on that when I was in Dallas, and at the end of my tenure in Boston, there was the call list of these certain board members you have to talk to every day or every other day. And if that didn't happen, it wasn't going to work that month. Things were not going to go that well. And I accept that idea. I believe that we're asking for a lot of board members these days. And so the exchange is to make sure that we, as the leaders, put the time and the energy into that, even though sometimes we feel like we have other things that we have to do. We have to realize that that is a crucial part of the job.
Thank you. Thank you for all sharing about it. Can we just raise your hand if you're a board member sitting in the audience? I'm just interested. Okay. 4 of you. All right. Great. Thank you. Thank you for being here. All right. I want to ask now if you would all be willing to share. I want to ask each of you this question. If you can pinpoint maybe what the biggest challenges, I know there's a lot, maybe one of the biggest challenges that your orchestra is going through right now, if you would be willing to share that, and then how you're approaching it, how you're thinking about it. Maybe we'll start this end of the line this time.
I think that I always think about our population and demographics. I think that's been on my mind quite a bit because the average, I think the median price home in Ventura County is 1.1 million. And a younger generation, my generation, they're moving out of Ventura County. We have aging donors who are reaching, when they reach a certain age, they move out of the county where the kids are. And all that money and cultivation and stewardship that you put into them, yes, some of them result in legacy gifts, but most of them go where their kids are. So I worry about the demographics and who will be our attendees in the future and who would support the symphony. And I think that multi-year giving is, we insist now on multi-year giving. We are in front of our donors and reinvent our legacy programs and adjust and adapt them and trying to be in front of them, while also investing in education programs. And I think that's where the future is. I see what Carl saw yesterday when we're investing a lot of money into youth now. And I probably won't see the results of my investment because legacy gifts, they're not, they don't turn in the annual fund immediately. And the youth is going to take time to grow and reinvest back in the community. But that's what I think about daily. Thank you. Kim?
Well, there are a few huge things going on. Obviously, we're in a music director's search, which is a very big deal because how do you replace a godlike figure like Gustavo, right? Everybody thinks he has the full package, everything's perfect, and the reality is nobody's perfect, but replacing someone that is perceived on that level is extremely difficult. So that's a process that obviously has a significant effect on the future of the organization. I think the other huge problem that we're facing, that's more the macroeconomic kind of thing, is what's happening in this country with the generational shift and philanthropy and all of that, and music education and the lack of it for the last number of decades that makes it incumbent on us to figure out how do we provide those services. Otherwise, in 30 years, what will our audiences look like? Who will be on our boards? If we think about surveys that have been done nationally, at least 50% of our audiences and even a higher percent of our donors had a significant music education, including active music making, playing instruments. And when you look at what's happening right now and you see that number has plummeted for the average population, what does that mean for us And we have to think about the future. We can't just think about right now, this time that we're in. And of course, we do have to think about right now and make sure we're doing our best in all ways financially for the organizations. But, you know, it's a very big change compared to 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And what are we doing now to strategically plan for the future is good for our industry, and that's something that I think about a lot.
I'm going to steal something you said to me over dinner because I really thought it was a problem. And it's a creative approach to management, but I think it's a problem, which is that, you know, I think Pacific and Dallas have some similar issues, which is you have this structural problem that's, you know, a long building gap that many of the larger orchestras are reporting. And so we invent, and they're high quality inventions, new programs and new projects which can generate exciting philanthropy to maybe even help generate, but then the project doesn't always have a long life, and then, you know, you're also demanding so much of the staff and staff time and so forth to implement these new projects. And you know, I just don't see a lot of donors really investing in classical concerts like they used to. You know, just the attachment to, I'm going to put my name on a concert, or I'm going to underwrite that new commission. And maybe that's on us because we've been chasing new initiatives, and more work needs to be done to engage people around that sort of core work. But I would say, you know, my experience is that every time I bring someone new to a concert, there's unbelievable enthusiasm and shock and surprise at their feelings about the experience. I'm sure that's a universal experience. They're sustaining their interest for a long period of time is proving to be difficult for those who don't have foundational experience with the art form. And there are just so many ways to entertain oneself today. I mean, you know, the Pacific Symphony really is extremely unique in terms of its competitive set in the Sagerstrom Center landscape. From commercial Broadway to the great visiting orchestras, chamber music from around the world. Like, our differentiating our experience is a extremely high question for us. Like, what is it that our concert delivers that the Vienna Philharmonic last week didn't deliver in our hall? That, I mean, who has to ask that question? We do it all the time. The LA Phil comes down with Gustavo. A week later, we're performing with Carl on the podium. What are we? So there's this kind of like mindset of our experience has to be extremely welcoming, very familial. Like, there are volunteers all over our hall who are welcome, welcome, welcome. So there's that, you know. There's an engagement from the stage that's unique. There's exhibits in the lobby. I mean, whatever it is, like, the experience has to be differentiated, and that's a huge staffing challenge. So there's a lot of these issues that we're struggling with.
To make it feel personal.
Curated, personal, like my experience is reflected on that stage.
Yeah.
And if my experience wasn't playing an instrument or going to Schulte's Chicago's Bruckner 9, like Carl wants to do Bruckner 9, right? So what did we do? We had to develop a theme over 3 years called departures. Like, what are the last statements of composers and what did they mean? So Tchaikovsky's 6, Mahler 9, Bruckner 9. What did it mean to the composer, and how do we take some universal themes from these great minds as they're looking at the end of their life and attaching Bruckner 9 to Gregorian chant? And it worked, but it's an immense investment of time. We're producing 12 classical sets, but it feels like we're doing 30 because each one has to have some unique engagement. And just the cranking out of product for the big orchestras, I really don't know how they do it. Just every week there's a road sign of goals. You know, opera companies have 5 productions. You know, they can invest in huge marketing campaigns, and we're just like, so The staff fatigue is another thing that I worry about. Staying fresh, staying engaged with each of those signposts.
I think I asked for the biggest challenge.
Sorry.
Emma, do you have any left to add?
Sure, I mean, on top of it, what everybody else referenced, I think our biggest challenge is becoming a household name again. Because in the Bay Area, we were America's premier historically informed performance ensemble. And yeah, and then all of a sudden, all these offshoots, which I'm so immensely proud of, came into being, which is fantastic because it just improves the arts ecosystem. But what I noted was, after reviewing strategic plans for the past 30 years, one recurring theme was audience development efforts. And nothing had changed over the years. So how do you diversify audiences? How do you broaden your audience base? That's what we're trying to deal with. There was such a focus on these national tours, international tours, but what about the local backyard? So that's what we're in the midst of doing right now.
Too big. These are big. Well, let's talk a little bit more. I'm just being mindful of time. We've got 10 more minutes before I want to kind of throw it out to our audience. I want to hear a little bit. John, you started talking about being mindful of your staff and bringing them along with you. And Kim, I know you've done incredible work in sort of next year. For a minute, sort of how you all think about, because what a lot of what you're talking about is future, right? What's the future of our audience? What's the future of our patron base? What does this look like for us? So what about the future of the leadership of orchestras? How do you think about that? How do you think about replacing yourself? How do you think about making sure there is a group of CEOs like yourself who are ready to lead? And how do you sort of look for talent on your own teams and try to cultivate that and try to get to know, sort of where your teams want to go and be part of their journey? I don't know, who wants to start with that question? Kim, I'm gonna have you start with that question. I know you did a lot of work on this in Dallas. I'm gonna have you start.
Yeah, I believe it's our responsibility to develop the next generations of talent, and it's not easy. The burnout thing is real, and the challenges that we've all talked about. There's a joy every day, certainly, in doing this work. I mean, I get up every day and I'm like, this is so exciting. I pinch myself that I'm doing this. The music, the people, it's phenomenal, but it's a commitment that like very few other jobs, this one and all of the senior leadership teams and a huge number of the managers in the organizations, especially in artistic and the public facing stuff. And so how do we make sure that we don't lose the best talent? How do we create a forum where people can learn and really understand how these jobs work? Because it's very mysterious. It's mysterious within your own organization. People don't realize, they have no idea what I do day to day. And actually it's different every day. So it's hard to explain. But the reality is there's the core knowledge that you have to have of the business. There's the respect and understanding you have to have for the specialists of the fields that are making the business work well. And then there's the talent development that we have to make sure that we're really keeping people in the pipeline, not letting them go to other fields, to other industries, because this is hard work. So how do we all sort of put ourselves together and create a supportive network of, yes, this is sometimes difficult, it is very inspiring, and how do we put the right ingredients together so that we can ensure that we don't lose the most motivated, most talented people because they just don't feel that there's a pathway. And, you know, I think that the League of American Orchestras has tried to work on this. When I was in Dallas, we created Women in Classical Music Initiative that was not only for the artistic side, but for the administration side. And there are lots of other initiatives and groups throughout the country. But we, as the leaders of the organizations, have to commit the time and the energy for this. If we don't commit it, we will have a resource poor industry in the end. And it's the human resources that drive our business on the artistic side and on the management side. And so I try to carve out a few hours a week to mentor people. I try to be available as much as I can to show up and be part of the conversation and the solution. And it's a hard commitment to make because we're always being pulled in different directions. I mean, this week for us, we have our music director in town for the 1 week. He's at the Bowl. We have orchestra contract negotiations with both orchestras, the Hollywood Bowl Orchestra and the LA Phil. But nonetheless, it's important to make the time to do things because it's the future. We have to really think about the future of what we do. This music, this is so important. We know it transforms people's lives. We know it touches people in a way that few other things do. And it's fragile. So if we don't commit, then who's going to commit? And so that's how I feel about it. I do to the best of my ability.
Thank you. Do any of the other panelists want to weigh in on how you're doing this?
My perspective is I come from a very small orchestra, so each person on my team is a department. So, you know, we're lucky if there is a second person, so there's no redundancy really in the organization at all. And it's hard to delegate or build more or put more on their plate. So if I were Frank, I think that our next leadership will come from a large organization, someone who can bring a new perspective, and I welcome that. Because if you're constantly in your own community, you're talking about the same things, then the fresh thinking can come from the outside more than from the inside. And so that's how I feel about limited resources. So I focus on building the pipeline and taking care of business today. So unfortunately, there's no redundancy to do anything else.
I deeply understand. John and Emma, do you want to add to that?
Well, I was an orchestra management fellow in the 1990-91 year and was assigned to 3 orchestras, the LA Philharmonic, with a very famous autocrat leader, Ernest Fleischman, who never met with me and assumed I would, assimilate through his wisdom as he yelled at his staff. That was the genius. But he was a brilliant man, did incredible things strategically. And then Louisville Orchestra with Wayne Brown, who chaired the National Endowment for the Arts, generous, never said no to a meeting, very spiritual guy, invited me to his home for dinners. I mean, it was really an amazing experience. It sort of set the table for me being in mid-sized organizations. I thought, it's so beautiful how he connected with the community. And then Joe Kluger at the Philadelphia Orchestra, who is a brilliant operational leader. He's very inexperienced when he took the job, but I learned a lot about how to manage more precisely. And of course, it's a great orchestra. I just fell in love with the musicians, and I actually shared a room with the chair of the orchestra committee on tour, and that was fascinating. I feel like the fellowship, which went away because it was a very demanding year for individuals economically. We're paid $15,000 to spend a year moving around the country. So it was just unrealistic. So they changed it to this Emerging Leaders program, which I think seems to be doing quite well. And then there's Van Parsons leadership program at the League. The League has done some amazing work in development. But I think taking away from the fellowship, it was really that generous people in an organization can really inspire people at all levels. And I've tried to hire people I sense were generous, and they have open doors, they coach their teams, they delegate well in many instances. And if I look at the Pacific Symphony, we probably have 20 projects that have CEO type behavior attached to them. And I'm not involved with any of them closely at all. And Daniel's here, he's leading the Inclusive Council, is speaking at general staff meetings beautifully, articulately, with inspiration. You know, it's very exciting when younger staff start to take on leadership. So, you know, for all of us, we just have to kind of let go and don't feel our importance is by the scope of our portfolio of responsibilities. Just kind of open up. And I think I'm not perfect in this regard at all, but I think we're definitely in an evolving state of growing trust within the organization.
Let go. I like that. Emma, you were also kind of rebuilding a team. You're a smaller orchestra like Natalia. Do you have any similar sentiments or others?
Yeah, actually, on a more granular level, having open communication with your staff is really, really key. So when you have, you know, the job description, or, you know, yearly evaluation, it's important to have expectations set and also to hear them out, to see what they want to do, what they aspire to do in the next 3 to 5 years. Because there's some people that exhibit these CEO qualities, but then when you actually have a one-on-one conversation, they then reveal, I never want to work for an orchestra ever again. I want to get out of the industry. But you work with, you know, the strengths and weaknesses, you work with what they want to do to improve their resume for that next big job for them. And so that's what I've had to do, both at Philharmonia as well as at SFJazz. And just work with, you know, the development team at SFJazz, for instance. There's one person who said, I never want to be a fundraiser, even though he was on the fundraising team for 7 years. And he said, I want to go into marketing. That's what I aspired to do, marketing in the tech industry. I was like, more power to you, let's DevComs instead. And so he really appreciated that. And that was a way for staff, because they felt like they were heard and were helping them grow in their career. And so that was the key for me there. And I'm hoping to apply that also to Philharmonia.
It's amazing. To cultivate, even if you know they don't want to stay in the industry, right? All right, well, we have about 12 or so minutes left, and I want to hear from all of you. There are many orchestra leaders in the audience or emerging leaders, and I wonder if you have any tough questions for our panel. They were very forthcoming as we prepared. They've been very forthcoming. I think they're more or less willing to answer anything. Am I just setting you up for disaster? Any questions?
Easy questions too.
Please, yeah, easy questions. Raise your hand and then I'll just repeat that. Elizabeth.
First of all, thank you all for being here and for sharing your wisdom with us. I'm wondering, how do you think about articulating and driving a vision for your organizations, particularly in times when constituent groups might not be in alignment? And what are the most powerful tools used to bring people together and work through those times, whether it's like formal strategic planning, grassroots relationship building? How do you lead through that?
I'll just repeat. The question was, how do you, what's your vision? How do you drive the vision forward, especially when constituency groups aren't agreeing, and how do you sort of manage those disagreements or in alignment?
What are the tools that we use to drive forward in a positive way?
Tools to drive forward in a positive way. Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. Anyone?
I think vision means different things to different people. I mean, so there's the Pacific Symphony vision is to lead a renaissance in appreciation, access, and impact of classical. Lofty, broad. We're going to tour to 5 continents. So I think, the strategic planning process is the forum, but how you execute one has been really different with different consulting firms that I've leaned on. And I think at the end, and frankly, who's in the room and what's sort of a big carrot that can inspire an anchoring carrot. For us, there was a vision around being, how do we put it, but sort of being worthy of a concert hall that was going to open 6 years later, being worthy of it, because it's a $240 investment in the city. So there was all this artistic growth, quality, community engagement that kind of sprung from that, and that can be super helpful. A music director search can inspire a very powerful vision. So I mean, there's the process of the bottom up where we survey the community. We get a lot of sort of broader feedback about what community thinks of when they think of an orchestra, they think of their needs, and so we've gone through that process, and that's been interesting, especially as we've developed our community engagement strategy. So sometimes foundational work can really help build a pyramid of understanding. But I think this idea of having a renaissance for the Pacific Symphony, I think was a little bit of a reflection of how Prop 28 moved through the state. And I thought, we thought that there's a movement now in California to reinvest in arts education, and can we be part of a movement? And can we, in fact, lead a movement in our county? What would that mean for regionalization? Because we don't have a center. We have 34 cities. So, a lot comes from sort of scanning the environment, looking for the needs, seeing if our organization can play a role in advancing topic. And, and then there's these carrot moments or silver coin moments, like a hall of music director that can stimulate and sharpen the vision. But I think the strategic planning framework has always been helpful for us. I don't know if that helps.
Anyone else?
Sure, I'll just jump in for a second. I think having a sense of the data and the community needs is a crucial component before starting a strategic process, and not just jumping into strategic planning with a consultant without having all of the various inputs and ideas discussed prior to, whether that's the team, an orchestra, the board, but also the intersection between our missions and the community is very different now than it was even just a few years ago. And change is hard, and people say they like new ideas, but when you get in their room, they don't actually really like new ideas that much. And so to really identifying what are the crucial priorities in that regard, and actually being on a sales campaign to sell them is the only way I've ever been able to get big ideas across the finish line. So that one-on-one, which you could call grassroots, but it's really about certain constituencies and then certain constituents who you have to have their support or you cannot move forward. And that varies. I mean, in LA County, the supervisors have a really big say in what we do, which is very different than a lot of places. Of course, certain board members, and if you don't have your team on board, you will not get change done, because it is very easy for the whole place to stop if you don't have the internal cooperation.
Elizabeth, if I understand your question correctly, I'm in agreement with Kim that data and facts speak louder than anything else. And so I lead with data and facts. One example for me in the last decade was the Symphony loved big galas. We had the Poinsettia Ball. And every year I saw that the ball actually cannibalized some of our annual fund donors, and it wasn't something that was working for us. But it took me about 5 years to be able to reset the vision for our Symphony League and move them in a more fundraising than fundraising, because fundraising really wasn't there. And and I think that it takes time to figure out what would work for them and just be really, really tuned in and say, and just analyze everything that's happening. So I think that's, for me, was the biggest challenge, is to figure out what the league is in the next 20 years.
Do you want to add anything, Emma? I know we have another question.
Sure, I think in the strategic planning process, remember the fact that change is good and vision can redirect, because times are changing right now. Everybody needs to reinvent themselves, let's face it. The other thing is the strategic planning process itself, do not be daunted by it. It can be fun. For me, it's a unifying process where you're engaging every constituent that's involved in your organization. And it's great to hear all these different voices. And then the final product, you're gonna be just so immensely pleased with it. So I just don't want anyone to be daunted by it, because it can be a really great thing.
That's amazing.
Ideally.
Ideally, right? There was another question. I saw a hand back in this direction. Is there a hand at this table back here? No? Okay, any other questions? We have 4 minutes or so. We could probably get one more question in. The tough one, stump them, Chelsea.
So I'm a third-year ED in my organization, and I find that time is so valuable. We all know this. I'm curious how, if you have any tips for how to prioritize your long list of to-dos, aside from like fires that you have to put out, to tackle those long-term projects, the vision that you have to tackle the long-term vision in your day-to-day lives, and make sure that's a priority. But just how to prioritize in general, and what has helped you. Just as a quick tidbit, as a performance major in my undergrad, my clarinet professor said, look at your sheet music and then split. Wherever the blackest parts are, that's what So if you have tips on how to prioritize, that would be great.
Squinting at something?
Yeah, squint at the strategic plan.
Anyone have any thoughts? How you decide what to tackle or not?
I mean, time management is the hardest thing, right? And there's enough work to work 24 hours a day, for sure. I think putting crisis management aside, just assuming routine kind of schedule, I tend to focus on the 3 top strategic initiatives, whatever they are, and it's different for every organization, but I try to spend most of my time each day working on that, and a lot of times that's communicating it, it's working with donors to solve it, it's working with a team on ideas related to it, and I think that is one piece, and the second piece is just making sure that the key funders and stakeholders of the organization are part of your daily thought process, and your it's not realistic to talk to every single one of them every day, but to make sure each week that you do, because it's easy to take for granted those people who are your best supporters, and I don't mean just financially, and then not talk with them for a while, and then you're really doing yourself a disservice, because it's not moving the whole idea process and the strategic process forward if you're not in constant dialogue with those people. And some of them are your team. It's not only related to external folks, but I think that is a crucial piece that makes us run more smoothly. I'll take orchestra negotiation example. If you have a good relationship with your musicians every day of the year, when you negotiate the contract, it's a whole different story than if you're in a conflict all the time. And so I try to think of all the aspects of our business like that, and how am I spending my time building the key relationships, whether it's on the artistic side or it's on the community side, that will help us what we're trying to do. And it took me a really long time to get to that point where before, if you go back in 10 years, I was too reactive and not spending enough time on the strategic and the meaningful. And it was like problem solving all the time. Now I still do problem solving, but it's in a different context.
And my advice would be every day, because we're a small organization, you have 100 things that are piled on your plate. And I have become very, very laser focused on do only things that only you could do. Like those things that only you could do. Who needs your attention? And everything else, I'm less involved even in negotiations. I used to be so involved in it, but it's not the only thing that I could do. So, I mean, someone else could do it now too. And that's been a relief for me to just do that. And then everything else.
That's really good advice. All right, we're gonna wrap up. I want to do one quick-ish panel, last question. Looking ahead 5 to 10 years, what is one hope you have for your orchestra? Go down the line, we'll start with Emma. Go down. One hope.
To make Philharmonia Baroque Orchestra Chorale very hip and trendy and just very relevant, not only in the community, but just worldwide.
Amazing.
Lofty.
Yeah. John.
To lead a renaissance in the impact, access, and joy, frankly, of classical music in Orange County.
Amazing. Yeah.
I would like to be able to use the resources and the breadth and depth of the LA Phil to make music and classical music specifically an important part of as many people's lives in LA. Because right now we're no longer at the forefront. And I mean, the LA Phil may be at the forefront of our industry, but it is not at the forefront of mind share and time for people, and we need to change that.
I've been toying with the idea of really embracing technology and create experiences that are more immersive. More audiences are actually participating in your, so you're not playing at them, you're playing with them and you're participating more. So I think that that's where we're headed, and I hope we could do more and bring more technology and AI into the experiences that we are all sharing at the concert hall.
The theme is all longevity and connection and relevance and service to your communities is what I'm hearing. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all of you.